You said the 27th.
I was trying to see, Maurice, can you hear us?
Maurice,
Yes,
can you
I
hear? Give a
can.
You
Okay.
can, thumbs up, you can hear? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I can hear you now. Thank you. I just was. Yep.
Yeah.
Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
There's a lot. Yeah, a lot.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I hear you. All good. Yeah, I hear you.
Okay.
Okay, my friends. Hello, my fun friends. We're gonna come and sit down. Come on in. Come on in. Grab a prayer book if you don't have one. If you're online, I have the prayers for you. Not a problem. Okay. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Does everybody have a prayer book in front of them? If you're online, I have the prayer book for you. If you're in person, make sure you have a prayer book in front of you. Okay, where's the new ones? They're on. Okay, so here's what I would like to do before we get started today. I'm sorry to say, but we are gonna move on from L'cha Dodi. We may do the last line just to sort of culminate it, but we are going to proceed with the rest of the service. Today, we're gonna focus on Shema and its blessings. There's a framework for that we are going to learn about together. If it's not there, then we'll worry about it another time. I'm sorry? Okay, all right. So, hello, everybody. Here's what I'd like everyone to do. I would like everyone to find their place. Oh, we'll do this. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I know. Don't you worry. We're gonna find our place. This is pretend. We are going to be pretending as if we are walking in to Friday night. Okay, so you imagine you've had a full week. Believe it or not, it's only Tuesday. So you may have already had what it feels like to be a full week. And we're gonna enter this space just as we would enter the sanctuary. We're leaving all that we have come from, all that we have been doing, all that we have been engaged in, and we're gonna enter this space and we're gonna allow it to feel and surround us and reside within us like we do when we come into the sanctuary. This is our sanctuary, because if you look around our Beit Midrash, we have our sacred texts, and we have an Arona Kodesh right behind Spencer. That is the Ark. There are Torahs there. Okay, there are Torahs in this space. Now I know you never saw it before. That's why we're doing this. So hello, Shelley, come on in. There's a seat right here. Right by me. Okay, so let me do this. Not a problem, right there by the front door. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do today. We're going to acquaint ourselves with space. Shabbat is about time rather than space. It's about what is eternal in time. But before we can access the eternal nature of time, it's important to find our place in space. So what is all around us in this room, this Beit Midrash, this house of study, is also the core of what we study, our Torah, in this beautiful Aron Kodesh, in this ark. So right now, I want to see your choreography. Meaning, when I do this, what do you do? Okay. So like any Aron Kodesh, it inhabits our sacred Torah, our book, that which binds us to one another, that which links us formally in an incredible chain of tradition that started at Sinai and was passed down from God to Moses to the people of Israel, to each of you, as we all stood at Sinai. Yes, that's why you're standing. We stood at Sinai to receive this gift, this blessing. So when we stand in our worship service, a few times, we are standing in recognition and in honor of the divine. And when we open the ark doors to formally stand, we are also in many ways reliving that moment where each of us, the generations that have come before us and the generations after, stood at the base of the mountain. So where we are right now is at the base of the mountain. And as we look up and as we open ourselves up, we open ourselves up to this Torah and to the experience that we shared as a people. So we have 2 Torahs. If you are fortunate, you have at least 2 Torahs in an ark. Why?
Finish one.
What? One for God and one for the people, okay. What else do you think?
One to act as if you don't have a minion.
Okay, right, so the Torah does serve as an individual, which I always think is so beautiful. A Torah, if you bring a Torah out, let's say you have 9 people if you're counting, the Torah serves as the 10th. So beautiful. Okay, sunset.
Don't want to see it lonely.
Okay, so sweet, right? We don't want it to be lonely. These are all beautiful midrashim, beautiful, beautiful interpretations. Why 2? If you're blessed and you're able to have 2, you at least have 2 because God has 2 witnesses, heaven and earth. The 2 Torahs serve as that symbolic witness to God. So not just in halakha and Jewish law do we need 2 witnesses and like a court of law in Jewish law, but also God holds God's self accountable to 2 witnesses to heaven and earth. Isn't that beautiful? Tradition's fabulous. Okay, so here's our 2 Torahs. You may be seated. This is how we begin. You need a chair? There's one right next to me. So when you enter this space again, it may feel a little bit different. Now, if we weren't so many people, I would have you leave the space and come back in. But next week, when you enter this space, you may think of the space a little bit differently. Because the space houses something that we consider to be incredibly holy and sacred. Each of us have the power to transform space into something that is holy. But this room, by its design, is also a sacred space. Because it houses our Torah and our ark. But also because we are surrounded by the texts of our tradition. And because we are all here. Right, so we elevate that mundane to the realm of the sacred. So, what I want you to do is put everything down that you're writing down. You don't need it for a second. And I want you to re-situate yourself in this space. I want you to place yourself here. I want you to allow yourself the gift of being fully here in this time, in this space, in this place. I want you to take a deep breath in. I want you to release that breath at your own pace. I want you to take another deep breath in. I want you to release that breath. I want to welcome you back, welcome you for the first time into this sacred space. And now we will open our prayer box. So we've been on a journey the past 2 weeks of Kabbalah, Shabbat, of receiving Shabbat. You need a prayer book, okay? And what I, okay, thank you. And what I absolutely loved about, one part I loved about this Friday night was watching all of you who were there totally immersed and with the smile of joy as we sang Lecha Dodi. As I looked out into the congregation, into the congregation, I saw you differently this Shabbat. I saw you actively engaged in receiving the words of Lecha Dodi so much differently than I've seen before, and I absolutely loved it. Absolutely, it was a joy for me to watch the joy you were having with Lecha Dodi this week. So that was what a treat. Okay, so Lecha Dodi, we've done it, but what I want to do is just, you can be on page 21. Okay, so we're gonna go, I'm gonna just, let's see here for my online friends here. The bottom, the last verse of Lecha Dodi we will end with as we move towards Baruch, but verse 9. Verse 9 is when we ask you to please rise, right? In the congregation, you rise, and we turn and we face the entrance of the synagogue. That is our formal, right? We are the ushers, we are the greeters, we are the receivers for Kabbalat Shabbat, for the Sabbath Queen. Boi v'shalom ateret ba'ala. Boi, come, enter in peace. O crown of your husband, this jewel of your husband. Gam b'simcha u'v'tzohola. Come, also enter and come in joy and in gladness. Right, b'simcha, right? It's a simcha, it's a joy, we are thrilled, right? Toch emune am segula, come to the people. Come to the people, am segula, that keeps, maintains this faith. Emune, emuna, right? Faith, emuna. Boi chala, boi chala. Now, what is the choreography of that? So technically, boi chala, we are bowing this way, boi chala, one way, boi chala, the other way.
Why?
Martha, perfect segue. Perfect. Boi chala, one way, boi chala, the other way. So technically, that also, what is that similar to when you see me going like this? When else do we do that? Kaddish, no, right? Let's say shalom, right? This is it, yeah. Amen, yeah. Okay. Boi chala, boi chala. Also, at the end of the Amidah, which we will do next week, at the very end, you'll see when people are done praying silently, they'll do this, they'll do this, they'll do this, step up, kiss their prayer book. Okay, so Lama, why? Martha's ready to know why. Okay, it is the angels of God.
It is what?
The angels of God. Michael, Gabriel, I'm moving towards the angels of God.
Oh,
Towards the angels of God on my right hand, on my left, all around me. It's this malchut, this like the angels of God, the archangels of God, the protectors are on either side of me. I am acknowledging that presence. I am bowing towards that presence of the divine. Also, some people say the divine is all around me. So I am now here. I am acknowledging here that there is this divinity that is surrounding me. Part of the choreography of our worship service. Boi chala, why? Also because we say it twice, so it's about reverence, it's about respect. You bow in reverence, right? When you think of the queen or the king, right? There is a curtsy, there's a bow, right? Out of reverence, out of honor, out of respect. It's the same thing with the chala, that we are bowing in that.
there's been so many different melodies throughout the ages, this song.
That is a perfect advertisement for next month's Lunch and Learn, offered in June with our cantors. That's a perfect question for them, right?
I always wondered about that. Is it
And it's not just this prayer, it's all the prayers have different melodies.
Sephardic versus Ashkenazi.
Parties, Ashkenazi, the composers being influenced by the music of their time and their day to sort of bring out the context of the prayer. How can we, right, that there are different composers over time in different parts of the world that are, the words are the same, but the melody is significant of the place and the time and the people and the context. So all of our, so one of my favorite, and this is something that the cantors I'm sure will talk about, but one of the things I always love is when someone says, you know, we just need to sing the traditional melody, right? What is the traditional melody? You know what the traditional,
Like the best.
exactly right. It's the one that you've always loved and you've always known, the melody that brings you back to your childhood, the one that you grew up with, right? So my traditional melody of Lecha Dodi may be very different than your traditional melody, right? But it's the melodies that we can remember being in certain times in certain places and the voices and the space, right? So I say it in a funny way that this is something to talk about next month, but it's exactly it's exactly the reason why we set the Lunch and Learn series up this way, that we're learning the prayers and then next month the melodies, because the melodies are so intertwined with the words on the page. And they tell it tells a different story. So it's really beautiful.
Question.
Yes.
Is it significant that we always bow to the right first, and anytime you bow, just like we read from right to left, or what is the significance always starting on the right?
So I mean, there's multiple stories or discussions about that, but the right was always known as the strength. Right? So I always hate to say that, right? Because like I have a sister who's left-handed. Okay, so all right, so right, so but there's
Closer to the heart.
I mean, you could make a midrash on that if you'd like, right? If you make, but the right is always known as the strong, as the strength, as the strong arm, as the right.
So the angel, there are two angels, and the lesser angel would be on God's left. So we bow to his left, which is our front, and then back, whatever. However, I got it mixed up. And then to God, so you're like going 3 steps.
So you're doing what?
So that bowing to the lesser angel, then the one closest to God, then to God.
Okay.
God's right.
It's like stage left, stage right. God's right, God's left. Okay. All right, but we're noticing, but right, so like we can already talk about how there is a difference in terms of like the interpretation of that, but the notion is that there is, here, come Maddie, come sit here. I'm gonna come sit here for a second. I'm gonna stand for
Okay, sure.
Okay, all right. All right.
There's a notion that could be asserted that right hand is the majority, and therefore the majority rules.
Oh, wow. We're going on a midrashic tangent there. But no, the idea is, right, but the right was always known as the strength, right, as the strong, so that's why technically, right, but, all right. But the point is that there is this, we're part of this angelic court of God, right, this is not angels, and the court of God are part of all of our tradition, is that God is surrounded by a heavenly court of angels, and so we acknowledge and we bow and notice that that divinity is all around us, okay? All right, let's move on. Okay, Shema u'virchotecha, the Shema and its blessings. So who here thought that the Shema framework started with Baruch Hu? It does. The Shema is the center, and it is on either side of it are blessings.
What page? 28.
Okay. Page 28 is the Baruch Hu. So the Shema itself is in the middle of different blessings, and it begins with the Baruch Hu. The Baruch Hu itself is the actual beginning of the worship service. So the Shabbat evening service begins formally with this call, the Baruch Hu. Okay? So the Baruch Hu itself is this formal beginning. And it's when we also have this Shaliach Tzibor, the leader of prayer. The Shaliach Tzibor's role really officially begins with Baruch Hu. There was a time, right, that everything preceding Baruch Hu, like we talked about with Kabbalat Shabbat, was a ritual that actually began before you made it into the sanctuary. Those things happened beforehand. The Kabbalat Shabbat, the Psalms, the recitations, all of that singing, all of that joy was leading us into the sanctuary. Now we're in the sacred space. Now our worship service can begin, and it formally begins with this call, the call of Baruch Hu, which is the bookends of the Shema. The Shema is bookended by blessings, which I also absolutely love the way that that is set up. Shema is bookended by blessings. Shema being our centerpiece, our affirmation, our formal declaration of oneness and the oneness of God. And it is lovingly wrapped and bookended in blessings. So we have Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Va'ed. What is the choreography of Baruch Hu? What happens? Spencer? What's the first thing that happens?
We bow.
Before we even bow, what is the first thing that happens?
Stand.
We stand. Right? We are called to stand. Right? Please rise for the Baruch Hu. We are now standing. We're standing and we're facing which direction? Beautiful. Facing, now be more specific, we are facing where? Jerusalem. Right? We're facing Jerusalem. Okay? And this Baruch Hu itself, we are standing, we're facing Jerusalem. Our bodies, our hearts, our souls are standing before God, before Yer Kodesh, before the holy city. In our sanctuary, we are incredibly blessed that we have, and we are facing that Jerusalem stone. So it even gives us even more of an image of Jerusalem. And even if we don't have one in our mind's eye, we have one physically in front of us that is calling us there, okay? And the first thing that happens is this is now the Shaliach Tzibor, the leader of worship's moment, where the Shaliach Tzibor starts. And technically, the Shaliach Tzibor would be the first one that says, Baruch Hu et Adonai, right? Baruch Hu et Adonai, HaMevorach. They bend their knee, right? So the first one who bends, Baruch Hu, you bend, et Adonai, you rise. Who wants to practice? Good, please rise. And why do we bend? It is part of that reverence, that bowing, but also Baruch Hu is from the root Barech, which is knee. Barech is your knee. I am here to amaze you, Susan. I think of every week, what am I gonna say? That Susan's gonna say, I didn't even know that. That's what I live for. So good, I'm loving it. Okay, ready? Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai. Why are we standing for Adonai?
Stand before God.
Stand before God. If your head is down,
You're not standing.
we're not standing, number one, but we're also, what? We've missed it. Right, we looked away. Baruch Hu et Adonai, okay? So technically, so this is what you'll see sometimes. Who usually bends first? The Shaliach Tzibor. The response is the Kahal, the congregation. The response is Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Right? Now it's a little quicker because you don't have the et, right? So it's Baruch Adonai. You're up. It's a little faster bend. You gotta be quick. Baruch Adonai. Right? Now you don't have to knock yourself out. All right. You know, it's not like a whiplash moment, but it's something to be conscious about, because the idea is we're bending with Baruch because of the Barech. But Adonai, we're now rising up. All right. You don't have to go crazy about it. It's just something to think about. Right? So Baruch Hu, right? Baruch Hu Adonai Hamivorach, right? Blessed are you, praised are you, Adonai, to whom our praise is due, right? Because if we look at the words, Baruch Hu, Hamivorach, same root. Same root, blessed, praised, Hamivorach, Baruch, okay? Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed. Praise Adonai. Praise to you, be you, Adonai. Okay, to whom our praise is due, Leolam Va'ed, forever. Forever. Right?
Olam is the world, right?
Olam is the world, also eternal, right? Eternity, forever, forever, forever. Now and forever. Va'ed is forever.
On and on.
Right? On and on and on, forever. Okay?
So every, it's different. The reason that we're doing it.
Not necessarily so different, pretty much there's similarity, right? This one is intentional because it is now we're standing, what I want you to imagine, the reason you could sit, you could be seated. The reason why we're standing is out of respect for God, but also now thinking about with Baruch Hu, it's the official beginning of our worship, and we begin that worship, just like imagine entering into the royal palace. And the first thing you do, if the king and queen are there, right, you're standing, you wouldn't come in and sit first, right? You come in and you bow, you're acknowledging the presence. What I love about Baruch Hu is it's not just the beginning of the worship or the prayer, it's about acknowledging formally the presence. So imagine what now in this part of the service, we've come from the parking lot, we've parked our car. We've entered the 2 doors, we've said hello to the wonderful membership committee who've welcomed us. We've made our way down the hallway, some make a little stop in the bathroom, some hang out in the chairs out front and schmoozy, right? Then we make our way in through the sanctuary doors into the space, whether it's the chapel or the sanctuary, right? We are now formally entering into this space. Now we're going to prepare lekabel, to receive Shabbat, right? We have one second. We're going to receive Shabbat. So there's a ritual that we have to do. Those are the songs. We now, L'cha Dodi, are going to formally welcome Shabbat by rising and bowing and showing that reverence. Traditionally, in a traditional congregation, let's say, at the end of L'cha Dodi is when the mourners would walk in. Why? Think about the choreography. Why? We're standing and watching who's coming to the door. We as a congregation can be now fully present to know who needs us, who's in mourning, also respectful of that. We may not go skipping up over to them.
Not in every synagogue.
No, not in every synagogue.
It's done here.
No, not here. In you would see it in, let's say, Orthodox or right, more in like a more traditional, like I don't know, Orthodox. Some conservative synagogues do it, and not all. But if you open up an art scroll prayer book, you'll see at the bottom it'll say this is the time traditionally when the mourners will walk in. It was also a time pre-emails, pre-phone, right? Who the people in the congregation would know who is grieving, who is in mourning. And we as a community would know how we can be there for them. It's beautiful, right? Now, why is it done? Why is it not done? Also personal preference. Some people at this don't necessarily want that, right? But in times, if you think about contextually, prior to formal announcements, and now everyone sort of, people can know, people can find out, we can call.
Right.
But prior to all of those formal communications that we now have, this was the opportunity for people to show, like, I'm in mourning, and the community gathered to say, now we know who, we need to be there for them, right? Like, we now know where they are. We may not just go skipping up to them and demand something of them or ask of something, but rather with an openness of heart and love.
Congregation would stand up.
Well, they're up because it's now Lachato Div, but now, and so they would go to be seated, but at that point, the people are walking in, so we now know who's entered the congregation, right? Spencer and then, Rashida, yeah.
Never mind. You skipped past what I wanted to say.
It's okay.
Bobby or
We have
Sunny is
so
gonna
many-
go through and greet us all as part of the tradition. Sunny comes up the rows and greets everyone.
Right, that's all part of the preparations, right? And her team, she's got a career. Right? Sunny's got a career.
Every single week since I came to Bethel, first time, Sunny greeted me at my seat in this. temple.
You know, her name is not actually Sunny, we gave her that name.
Really?
No, just kidding. It couldn't be a more perfect name. The Sunny presence that welcomes everyone to Temple Bethel. Okay, Rashida.
I just wondered, and also contextually, if, it's a question, but an observation, like Lachato D, we studied it so specifically about rejoicing.
Mhm.
That maybe also if you're a mourner,
Right,
is it like you come in to praise God humbly, but you're not necessarily present for the joyous.
the joy piece. Yeah, no, I think that's an astute observation, and I think that could absolutely be true, right? Like understanding where we are in our own
Like our capacity.
capacity for openness, right? Although we don't mourn, we don't sit shiva, we don't on Shabbat, right? But understanding, and I think one of the pieces I love about our tradition is the intentional thought behind each piece. And so that is, you could argue, absolutely an intentional choice to say, like, we've just been joyous and welcoming Shabbat, and now the formal service begins, and that sort of the tone, that's to say that we're not joyous, but it's sort of tone sort of shifts a bit, and that allows us all to be open to receiving. Hold on one sec, I'm sorry, what?
Why is it in some congregations, for Kaddish, everybody stands up, and those who are in mourning, 3 or 4 people?
Okay, great questions. So traditionally, you recite Kaddish if you're reciting Kaddish, right? So there is a tradition, or there's that you only recite Kaddish, or you don't start reciting Kaddish, let's say as number one, if you're not a mourner, okay? Also, if there's a tradition that if your parents are still living, you don't, like above a mindset, like you don't wanna, God forbid, right, tempt kanahar, put a kanahar on it. So people who are not, who have both parents alive, they don't recite Kaddish. That's why some people would leave, you would see like there'd be some people who would leave the synagogue for Yisker and then come back after Yisker if they don't have the mourners, because remember, mourners are a certain status, it's a certain classification. Right, so the term itself, mourner, has become more of like a word that we use in from a Jewish perspective, from the eyes of the tradition, there are particular people who are mourners. So the spouse is a mourner. The children are mourners, right? So spouse and parents, siblings, children. Yeah, and spouse, yeah, okay, right? So those are the mourners. So they would recite Kaddish. So in some congregations, the only people who would stand to recite Kaddish are those who are either in mourning, who are mourners, or, right, who are reciting Kaddish for someone on a yard site. What happened over time, like the Reform movement, made different distinctions to say that we always want to make sure that there's someone who is reciting Kaddish for those who were killed in the Shoah, murdered in the Shoah. And so that's why it became more of a formal practice for everyone to rise and to recite Kaddish. There are also some people who will stand for Kaddish, but not actually recite all the words. They would only come in on the congregational pieces, right? So Kaddish, there are parts that are led by the mourners, and then the congregation joins them. It's their other parts, right? That's why there's been Omar Amen. Omar Amen is because I have not said it, I then come in for the Amen. True, technically, you don't amen your own blessing or your own prayer, right? It's like an amen. But otherwise, if you say Vinomar amen, for those who didn't recite the blessing, say the amen, it's as if they've said the blessing. Does that make sense? We'll get to, next week when we do the Amidah, if we have time, which I don't know if we will, but we can make a little time to just go over the Kaddish, in terms of the sense of the choreography of it and the messaging behind it, the meaning behind it. Okay, So Baruch Hu, now we understand, right? We have any questions about Baruch Hu in terms of the choreography, in terms of why we're standing and why we're bending, right? It's not just because the rabbis during the service decide when I want you to stand and sit. Right? I may have that power, but there's a reason, right? And believe it or not, you stand and sit at the same time every week. Robin,
Is Baruch Hu only done as part of the Kabbalah Shabbat service?
no, Baruch Hu is part of all the services. Baruch Hu, though, is one of those prayers that you have to, you recite when there's a minyan. You also don't technically do it in the afternoon service.
Oh.
Okay. Baruch Hu is one of those, though, that you need a minyan for. Okay. Any other questions about Baruch Hu?
I have a question.
Great.
Earlier. Are all synagogues built so that you're facing Jerusalem while you're in the service? Is that intentional? I mean, it's very intentional on our 3 rooms, but is that how all synagogues do it?
Yeah, so she asked, are all synagogues facing Jerusalem, facing east? So I would probably say that the majority are, but there are some that it may not be. But technically, that is the tradition, right? That the ark, it's the ark. Let me be clear, not necessarily the bima. Okay? But the ark is facing towards east, towards Jerusalem. Now, remember, we saw in our Sephardic, now that they're facing east, but remember, the bima is not always in the front of the room. Right? In the Sephardic tradition, it's in the middle. In the Ashkenaz tradition, it's in the front. But the design of every sanctuary, although most sanctuaries have design committees, that is not why the elements in the sanctuary are there. It's because our Torah tells us. The Torah teaches us how the sanctuary should be constructed, what elements are important to be there. We glean that from our Torah. So the ark, the ner tamid, the Torah, a menorah, the lights, the place to have the sacrifice, which becomes avodah, which becomes the prayer service, that table, all of that is shared with us from God in the Torah. Okay, the beauty of it and the adornment of it is also in the Torah. That notion of chidor mitzvah, that it is a mitzvah, a command to beautify the pieces that are sacred to us. Okay, so that design and those elements that are present are written in the Torah, and that teaches us what it should look like and be like. But in terms of the interiors of it, every synagogue is a little bit different, right? Which is also beautiful. But no matter where you go in, whichever synagogue you go into, most likely you're gonna feel a sense of familiarity, regardless of what it inside, the interior of it looks like. You will find some sense of comfort and familiarity regardless of where you are in the world. All right, so our service begins with Baruch Hu. Now we turn the page to page 30. And we have now this blessing. We know it as what? Please join me in reading Ma'ariv Araviv. So what's beautiful about this is that now our blessing here is focused on creation. Because what is the Sabbath? What is Shabbat? That
God created everything and rested. for a
Right.
day.
So it's the culmination, right, of creation, but it's not over. Creation is not over. In the morning, we say Yotzer Or. Right? In the evening, we say Ma'ariv Aravim. Yotzer Or and Ma'ariv Aravim flip-flop, meaning they hold the same space in order of the Shema and its blessings, but Yotzer Or, who created light, we read in the morning, which makes sense, right? The creation of light in the morning. Ma'ariv Aravim, who spoke and the evening is brought into being. So that makes sense that we recite Ma'ariv Aravim in the evening. Isn't that cool? Right, so you have the structure of the service is the same, meaning there are blessings that we recite before the Shema, but we change the language to set ourselves and root ourselves in the time. Because remember, Shabbat is about what? Time rather than, Hesha would be so proud of us, right? It's about sanctifying time. So now we're gonna sanctify this piece of the evening of time. We are rooting ourselves in time. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, right? It's a blessing. There's a formal structure to a bracha, a blessing. Different than a tefillah, a prayer. Got it? A blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. We say many brachot, blessings in a day. But there is a formal structure around a blessing. Then we have, if we skip to the bottom, a chatima. Let's say it. A chatima. We'll say it again. Chatima. The chatima is like the stamp. Chatima, the seal at the end of the blessing. We have the opening, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. And at the very end, the chatima, Baruch, we'll read it together. Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim. So if you flip the page for a second on page 32, I just want to show you the structure. At the very end, you have the chatima. Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael. That is a chatima, the ending of the bracha. The chatima, the seal. The end, here's the seal. We're wrapping it all up, the summation of the bracha. Okay, so ma'ariv aravim. So we've done the Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Now we have the third line, right here for those of my friends online, starting with Asher. Okay, everyone, we're on the third line. You see it? Asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim. Who bidvaro comes from midaber, lidaber, the root to speak. To speak, page 30, to speak. Creation, the world comes into being through God's what?
Voice.
Speaking, right? Through God's speech. That is the tool that God uses to bring the world into being. Now I want you to think about that for just a moment. Because we think about that each and every evening. And on Shabbat, we recognize and we say out loud that the world was created. All that we know came into being through speech. Imagine now if we saw every day, if we acknowledged our work and our partnership with creation and bringing about a new day, a new world, a new creation through the power of our speech. That what we say not just matters, but it is the tool by which we create our world. How would we use that tool differently? Asher bidvaro, who speaks. Ma'ariv aravim, the evening into being. Aravim, erev, evening. Right? You have Laila, which is night. Shalom, that's me. Erev is evening. Boker is morning. Okay? In this particular moment, we are focused on Aravim, on the Erev, on the evening. Bechochma poteach she'arim. Chochma is what? Wisdom. Chochma. Poteach. Open. Sha'arim. Gates, sha'ar. The gates. Through wisdom. Opens the gates. Wisdom, chokhmah. Okay? So through speech, it happens. Erev comes into being, creation happens. Through wisdom, okay, so wisdom is important here. Opens the gates, uvit vuna meshaneh itim, and has this ability to alter the time, umachalik et hazmanim, and the seasons, opportunity to thoughtfully alter and change the time and the seasons. Sader et hakochavim. Seder, what's seder? Order, and orders the stars, kochavim, the stars. Okay? B'mishmor tehem barakia kirtzono, and arranges and orders the stars in their heavenly order. Okay, according to plan. The intentionality in the design is so beautifully written here. Through speech, through wisdom, through order. What a beautiful blueprint for us. Speech, wisdom, order. Okay? Borei yom v'layla. You are creator, you created the day and the night. Golel or mipnei choshech. Remember, this is literally from creation story, right? Moved away, you rolled away light from darkness. Remember, that's God separates the light and darkness, right? Uma'avir yom umevi laila, transforms, changes, passes from day into night, right? Avir, avor, pass. Uma'avir, yom umevi laila. Umavdil bein yom uvein laila. Umavdil, what does that word remind you of? Mavdil. It's a ritual, a ceremony that we do. Havdalah. The havdil, some from the same root, which means to separate. Okay, umavdil bein yom uvein laila, that you actually separated, Adonai, you separated and distinguished day from night. There is a distinction. Okay? Adonai tzavaot shamo. Adonai, like the host of heavens, is your name. Shemo, your name. El chai v'kayam, ever living God. Tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed. Tamid, may you always reign over us forever and ever. Baruch chatima, together. Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim. Blessed are you, Adonai. Ma'ariv aravim, who brings on the evening. What also happens at evening in Jewish tradition? What?
The day starts.
Yes, it begins. The day starts. The day, right? Things happen in the evening. Holidays begin in the evening. The sun sets. It's now a new day. So now Ma'ariv aravim, you have now brought on the evening, which now means also evening is here. Shabbat is here. So for Shabbat, it's like Erev Arvim, the evening is here, the sun has set, Shabbat. That's
So in Jewish religion, evening is the start of the next day.
right. The day transforms and changes when the sun sets. It's now the next day. So for example, how does that impact or why is that significant? Number one, for holidays. That's why we have an Erev Rosh Hashanah, right? Passover, you'll see a difference when you see like, calendars that are not like Americanized calendars trying to place Passover, right? They'll say Passover day 1, like say on Tuesday. And so it says Passover 1. Well, it's actually started the night before. So your Seder should be on Monday night, right? Then the next day of Passover begins on that Tuesday evening. That's when the second Seder is, right? It's a valiant effort, but it's like evening starts, then the next day, right? So for example, if a baby is born, okay, you're gonna say it, you wanna say it, Lauren, you can say it.
I'm not sure I can say it, but you would say it.
But that's okay, you can say it like you can say it,
Okay.
and your words create life and creation too, just as mine. Yeah.
Yeah, this brought light to me because I do that after, in the winter. If you're having a baby after maybe 5:30 or 6, you have the breasts. Either 7 or like 8 days later.
Right, so it'll always be 8 days later, but you count, that's why a moil will ask you, so that's exactly right. That's why the moil will ask you, were they born before or after sunset? Because the day starts, a new day starts. So the 8th day, it doesn't matter if it was Tuesday to Tuesday. At that time, it matters what day is it, right? So in Judaism, the Hebrew birthday of the child would be different. So it wouldn't be like, let's say they're born after sunset on 1 Tishrei. His Hebrew birthday would be 2 of Tishrei, because the second begins at sunset, right? So exactly right though, right? So that's why it's not like a crazy question. If the rabbi asks you, well, what, were they born before or after sunset? It's like, we just need to know what date to put on the birth certificate, like this is it, right, for the Hebrew naming certificate, that's all.
How do they determine the order of their prayers?
I'm sorry?
How do they determine in the service the order of every prayer based on what?
So. So, no, there's a, like, so it's the same thing of like, how did we order the Torah, right, or the Talmud, right? So we decided what makes the most sense, in the sense of like, we're creating the structure of a liturgical framework, a prayer framework. Right, so if we think about the structure of the Shabbat evening service, I'm not talking about the rest of the evenings, I'm just talking about Shabbat today. Right, you have Kabbalat Shabbat, the opening songs, and so the Kabbalists and Sfat, as we talked about, decided what that order was in order to best represent what is the intention that we're trying to articulate in this opening ritual as we welcome Shabbat. Then, because we know, the Kabbalists knew that the prayer service starts with Baruch Hu, the Shema, and its blessings, which Baruch Hu begins, okay? And then after, Emet Be'atziv, it's done, we now go into the Amidah framework, which is gonna be, you have Milchamocha, you have Hashkivenu, you have the Tefillah. Right, now all of a sudden we're gonna separate another framework, right? So it was our sages and our tradition over time created this entire framework for what a service would look like, a prayer worship service would look like. And so that's how it's decided. These prayers, regardless of where you go to pray, these prayers are there. Now, there may be more, there may be some, but the order, the basic baseline order is the same. If I go into a conservative synagogue, or if I go into an Orthodox synagogue, whatever it is, and I pick up the prayer book, there's gonna be maybe a few more things that are in here and in other places, but the foundational pieces are gonna be the same. So how did the Reform Prayer Book come into being? There's a Reform Prayer Book committee, okay, to put it together, but if you think about, with any place, whether it's Reform, Conservative, doesn't matter. Right, there are intentional choices being made, though the classical, if I opened up the Union Prayer Book, it's gonna look very different than what Mishkan Tefillah looks like. Because that's an evolution of ideology and theology that have shifted and changed over the time from the 1880s until 2025. Right, so Mishkan Tefillah, it was published in 2007. You have gates of prayer in between, gates of gray, gates of blue, the language, the translations have shifted and changed. From the biggest shift in terms of the choices of what is in and what is out was the difference between classical reform, which is the Union Prayer Book, to what we have today of Mishkan Tefillah. Because the ideology, like the theology and the ideology of the reform movement has changed and evolved, which I think is beautiful. It represents also from where we've come from, like what's brought us into being, to a reemergence of Hebrew language over time, to the reintegration of, if you see, we'll get to it, but like in the Amidah, you have Hakol and Meitim. That's an intentional choice that they're both there. Some congregations say Hakol, everything, Meitim, resurrection of the dead. In the traditional prayer book, you'll just see Meitim, which we'll talk about next week, but it's a perfect segue into that. but in the Mishkan Tefillah, there's a choice. It shows that there is a variance. There is varying degrees of practice, even housed within one house.
So we got the congregation who wants different, why can't there be a uniform or reform? Because we're all different.
Cause we're Jews, we're never gonna stay on one foot.
Well, there's this. I mean, this is the Reform prayer.
If I go to my daughter's synagogue in Charlottesville, it's a reform, it's different.
That's okay.
Maybe the prayers are there, but Jews, they can't agree, let's do it this way, no. So somebody from here will go open up another synagogue to do it his way.
Oh, no.
But I will tell you one thing, Rabbi, and that was Rabbi Dan was on the committee of the Reform HUC that looked at this new book. And the book before this, we had in our congregation for a long, long time before we ever changed to this book.
Correct.
It took us a long time before we ever did this, but Dan was on that committee that reviewed the whole thing and put his stamp of approval.
Right, so every synagogue, there's no mandates as to what you should use, but is there a Reform prayer book? Yes, there is a Reform prayer book. Is there a conservative prayer book? Yes, there is a conservative prayer book.
This isn't the reform.
This is the Reform prayer book.
But not all synagogues.
Right, but that's not, what I'm saying is there a Reform prayer book? Yes, there is. Published by the CCAR, the Reform Movement, Mishkan Tefillah is the Reform prayer book. There are some synagogues who choose, for a variety of reasons, to create a prayer book of their own, to be more, to reflect the nature of their congregation, their community, which is beautiful. And it's not to say that the prayers, I guarantee you, are there. A lot of the time it's the translations, right? Or that they feel like there is a different, that it would better represent who and the voices within that space. When I was in Birmingham, we wrote our own prayer book. It was a beautiful prayer book. Were the prayers different? No, the prayers were there. But they made intentional choices with the translations and with the artwork, and they wanted the art of their congregation to be present in their prayer book. So it reflected the heart of who they were. That was an important value. When you walk into a synagogue and you see their prayer book, you can also see the values that guide the congregation. These are all beautiful things. I think that what I love about that, for a number of reasons, is that it responds to the nature of our tradition, where our tradition says those are the things that like you can do, because it shows the growth, the breadth, the depth, and the evolution of our people, and that it's an ever evolving tradition. But the words are there, guaranteed. The words are there. Dervana, and then I'm coming over this way.
I'm not in favor of the class, very nice, just to show you that Rabbi is on the right track.
Nah.
This is messianic, it says messianic.
Oh.
Right, beautiful. Yeah, Anita.
I just want to make a comment. I was on the committee, and it was thousands of people who wrote, the new prayers for the High Holy Days.
Beautiful.
And, one of the things that we wrote it section by section, and we had at that time it was phone calls, because we didn't have Zoom. We Zoomed hundreds of people, and then 25 people, and then, but the things that we considered were also secular prayers that fit in with the prayers that were traditional. So that when you see in that prayer book on the side poems and things.
Which you'll see here too.
See here too. I wasn't part of this one.
Oh, let's not talk about it then.
But, right. But I'm just saying that it wasn't only rabbis who wrote.
That's right.
So it was all, the call went out to all of Reformed Judaism.
Reform, no ED,
Reform.
reform.
Judaism.
I have a fast comment. I knew, I didn't have a reform prayer book. I got online, there were thousands. Choose one. Well, I'd like it to be Shabbat. Oh, and anything else? You know, you can put in whatever you want and come out the cake, the one that you get. And I got a pretty nice one, I think. Doesn't look like this so much, but I have to go and look.
But basically they're all,
But they're the same, but they're different.
yeah, basically the structure is there, just like, I went to worship in Argentina. And it wasn't a Reformed congregation,
But the structure is there, even if it's an Orthodox congregation.
That's right. Because the prayers are the prayers. The Torah is the Torah, whether we read 10 verses of the Parsha or all 7 aliyot, the words are the same, they're there. But we're just making choices as to what we're reciting, how we're reciting them out loud, privately, silently, whatever it is. But the prayers is prayers. Okay, so let's turn the page 32. You have Ahavat Olam. So we're still in the Shema and its blessings. So that it started with Baruch Hu, we acknowledge the presence. We stand and we acknowledge the presence. We then acknowledge creation. That our words, through wisdom, through order, the world comes into being. Eric, we've separated day and night. We are acknowledging creation. And then we acknowledge love. Ahavat Olam, everlasting, eternal love. Beit Yisrael Chavta, you have offered and loved your people, the whole house of Israel. Torah u'mitzvot, laws and commandments, Torah and commandments. Chukim u'mishpatim, right? Laws and precepts, otanu, that you taught us. So you've loved our people. How have you loved us? You've loved us and shown your love through Torah, through commandments, through rules and obligations, and that you've taught us this. Taught us this, God. Alkein Adonai Eloheinu, therefore Adonai our God, V'shochbeinu uvkumenu, when we lie down. Uvkumenu, remember kuma, kumi. Remember that one from last week? Rise, get up, right? V'shochbeinu uvkumenu, when we lie down, when we rise up, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, we will rejoice in the words of your Torah. B'divrei, again, the words, significant. V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha. We will rejoice in the words of your Torah, u'mitzotecha and mitzvot, le'olam va'ed, forever. Ki hem chayenu ve'orach yameinu. For because these words, this Torah, your words of Torah, they are the length of our days. They are our life. They are our life and the length of our days. Uvahem negei yomam v'layla. And we will think about them, reflect on them, day and night. V'ahavatcha al tasir mimenu la'olamim. Don't take this love away from us. Never remove your love from us. Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael, who loves your people Israel. You created us, you created the world, you created the day. We are partners in that work of creation. And we also are reminding you, and we are reminding ourselves of this Ahavat Olam, this eternal and everlasting love that we share. Okay. Page 34, we have 1 minute to talk about the Shema. Clearly, we'll touch on this next week. So what I want to do next week is we'll do Shema and the Amidah, because it's such a centerpiece of our worship service. It's also really, it's a beautiful piece, and there's a lot of wonderful intricacies to it, and it changes and it shifts depending on the time in the day. So we'll focus on Amidah, also the name of it, Tefillah, Amidah, there's significance there too. But what I want to do is I want us right now, I want to just pay attention to 2 things on this page before I let you go. If you look at the Hebrew word Shema, the first word here, Shema, the last letter is an ayin, and it's bigger. The last letter of the last word is a chad, the dalet. Okay. When you put ayin and dalet together, they form a word. The word is ed, meaning witness. Witness. We started our class, beautifully so, by standing and taking in the 2 Torahs as the 2, right, representing the 2 witnesses of God, heaven and earth. But also aid, ayin and dalet. Aid means witness. So we bear witness to the oneness of God. We are witnesses of that beauty and that profound oneness. Also, just another thing to think about, you'll hear in some synagogues, there's a tradition, a minhag, a custom, that when people say the Shema, they'll say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Duh. Because why? Right, they wanna say the Daled, because you want it not to sound Echer. The different word. They wanna be intentional that it's Echad, one, not Echer, others. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, not another or other. So there's a reason why they'll say Echad, right? It's just a pronunciation of that it's one, not another or other or others, that there are others. Okay? And then finally, the last thing that I'm gonna just show here is when we think about Shema, we oftentimes, it's most often translated as Hear, O Israel. I want us to think about Shema and also as a listen. It's one thing to hear things, it's very different to listen to things. So when we say Shema, one of the things I want you to think about this Shabbos, or when you say the Shema, whatever your ritual is, that Shema is not just about hearing. That's more passive. Shema is about listening. Shema is about a call to all of us to Shema, to listen to ourselves, to listen to that sense of oneness that we are seeking, that we are hoping for, that we are feeling, that we are looking for, that we are bearing witness to, but also Shema to listen, to truly listen to that which is around us, to listen when people are speaking to us, to listen when we are being called, to listen for the still small voice. It can't hear if you're not listening. Let's conclude our class with the words of Shema. Which 2 feet on the ground, sit up a little bit in your chair. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Moshe Evo Malchutam Le'olam Amen. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
I'm
See
going
you
to
next
reserve a
week.
question for next week.
Yes, you can tell me. You want to ask it now or you want to wait for
Well,
next week?
No, you can think about the question. The question is, some rabbis use their tallis to cover their eyes.
Yeah.
And over the last 30 years, I've noticed different rabbis doing that. Others put their hands over their eyes, and some of them just shut their eyes. So maybe next week you could explain those 3 things, which is the proper and which is why some rabbis do some things and others don't.
And not just rabbis, but yes, we'll talk about the